Well, it seems like every day we keep hearing about either, a product that is being recalled or a food stuff that is being recalled because, they've discovered E. coli or listeria. And I guess a big part of the question here is that with food recalls doubling since 2002, is it a matter of our food supply is getting that much safer, or are the folks that are charged with testing the products getting that much better? To talk about it this morning, it's Garyld Miles. He's the vice president of the Realtime Group, a product testing and design company, and he joins us on the wake-up call. Garyld, thanks for being with us this morning. So I guess first things first, is it just we're better at it now, or are things just not as safe as they used to be?
Well, I take it as a sign of, protection where, things are being tested more rigorously, so we get more information about issues in the supply chain, and then that comes out as a recall, eventually or at different times, and that protects us all, right?
Okay. But in those terms, then, essentially what the deal is that we're just getting better at testing the stuff is what I guess the answer there is.
Well, I can apply that to like medical devices and kind of high reliability type systems that we work with. The testing is more rigorous now. The standards that the design and the device itself have to meet it's a higher bar that they have to pass to get certified. So in that sense, there is more testing. In addition to that, there are more products on the market as well. So assuring, like in the case of food, assuring the supply chain for the components that go into food products or components that even go into, like a medical device or an automobile or something like that are subject to higher scrutiny. So the detection's better, and that protects us all more.
One of the things that has struck me, sometimes you'll see a recall for a particular item or an automotive recall, and in the course of it, essentially they've found 3 or 4 failures of some kind. And I wonder at times, when you look at something like that, you have to expect that there is going to be a certain amount of product that makes it to the market that for whatever reason, be it in production or a subcontractor, didn't quite make it through product control, that will hit the market and there will be a huge recall, and you look at it and go, but really the percentage of failures was incredibly small. I mean, isn't there such a thing as sort of plus and minus that's accepted in terms of, products?
Well, I can tell you this, that there is a what we call the bathtub curve. It's the reliability curve of components, and typically most of the failures occur in what we call infant mortality, or early in the cycle of use, and then at the end of the cycle of use, at the end of the product life cycle, for example, the failures start to increase, and then it's but you want to set your product, from an engineering term, you want to set your product life span to be less than that, the end of that curve where you start seeing increased or decreased reliability.
So there is such a thing, then, what I'm kind of hearing you say is there is such a thing as planned obsolescence.
Well, what we have to do is we have to determine what the product life cycle is, and that goes all the way back to every single component that makes up that product, and the use environment on how it's used, and its use envelope on how the component operates within the system, and we have to design in some margin and then know that it's going to meet that product life cycle. If it's 5 years or something like that, it's going to be at least at the minimum performance level for that entire time. Otherwise, you're going to have a design that's not capable of the reliability that's required for that.
When you have a situation like we had a couple of years ago, and it had to do with brakes in automobiles, where you had all these different manufacturers that were recalling their automobiles because of the brakes, because one company was making the brakes or brake components for a number of different automobile manufacturers. Is that an exception to the norm, or is that more the norm where you have one particular company that's making a variety of components or the same component for a number of other companies? Is that kind of the norm now?
That's pretty common. Especially like in automotive and some of our other high reliability type systems that I work in, there are just a few vendors that can get their what we call that OEM component, which would be like the brake pads or the brake calipers or whatever. They can get that certified, and then they can then it's available to be specified, in other manufacturers' vehicles in this case. So you can have that happen where you get a certified component, it gets put in lots of vehicles, but then there's a problem with it, and then it'll go across several manufacturers that way.
How much time or how much money really do major corporations, and I'm going to kind of stick to mechanical things that we're talking about here, spend on actual testing of their particular products? I mean, is it, for instance, like refrigerators, it would seem like, okay, it's pretty simple. You've got a compressor, you've got your coils, you've got a motor that runs the compressor, you've got a power supply, and that's about it. I mean, do they spend a lot of time, for instance, opening and closing the door on a prospective model to see when it's going to fall off, or is that just kind of a fantasy?
Well, there is a pretty high standard for consumer products like that because they want to make sure that they want to assure quality as well. So they want to make sure the product goes out to the customer's home and it stays there; it doesn't come back. So to me, that definition of quality is the product. The customers come back and the product doesn't, right? And so they have that focus of, because it's very expensive to take something back and replace it or to rework it for the customer. So they have that focus. But there's also a minimum standard from a safety standpoint that those types of appliances have to meet. So it has electrical and shock testing and those kinds of things as well. So there's a lot of testing that goes into it. And each industry and each type of a category of device is a little bit different in what the testing is that it has to meet. But in general, all those appliances like you're talking about, like a refrigerator, it needs a product safety mark on it, so it has a pretty extensive level of testing before it comes out as a particular model.
Is it realistic to think that we will get to the point, or we should even expect to get to a point of nearly 100% reliability on any given product?
I don't know that we'll ever get there. I mean, that is the goal. We would love to have 100% reliability on everything, but there's an economic cost to that, so there's always going to be a trade-off between the economics and the reliability of something. Because if you think about it, like for military avionics systems like we work on sometimes, that can happen. What can happen is that it takes a lot of testing and very expensive, and so that makes the device very expensive to the customer as well.
All right. Garyld, we'll have to leave it with that. Thanks for joining us on the Wake Up Call this morning. Garyld Miles, he is the Vice President of the Realtime Group, a product design and testing company on the Wake Up Call, and that's good for us.